Today we celebrate this solemn high feast of the precious body and the precious blood of the Lord, which really is an extension of Holy Thursday and lived out literally on the cross on Good Friday. And so in truth we can say that the Eucharist which we celebrate, this precious body, this precious blood, which is a gift from the heart of Jesus, is a gift of intimacy. God desires to be close to us. And so the desire for intimacy is a desire to be close. And God desires to be so close to us that He allows us to handle Him, to touch Him, literally. He's placed in our hands, He's placed on our tongue, and He becomes vulnerable. And so I want to share with you a story about a desire for intimacy. It's a true story, and it was printed in the New York Times this past Friday. It's an amazing story. I think you'll find it really amazing, literally. So listen. It's the story about a man who lives in East Williamsburg, New York. And so he tells his story. In the summer of 2013, this man was rather melancholy. He had a good job in marketing with an office in New York, some support staff, and a growing list of connections. But he had met a woman in Arizona named Michelle. He was in love. She was not. The girl didn't want to be with me, he said. The girl had categorically made that clear, he wrote in the statement. So on August 24th of 2013, he walked across the Williamsburg Bridge and he wound up in front of 253 West 43rd Street. And the neon sign in the window read, "Psychic." So the psychic greeted him and assured him that he and Michelle were twin flames. Isn't that nice? But that negativity was keeping them apart. "Spirits talked to me," she said, according to the man's statement, but there was a price. Isn't there always? So he paid her $2,500 and it gets better. And on the second visit, $9,000 more. So a month later, in September, the psychic told him that she needed diamonds to protect his energy. So he paid $40,064 for a ring from Tiffany's, and he gave it to the psychic, who promised that he would use it as an engagement ring someday. Michelle lived in Los Angeles. Go to her, the psychic said. So he went. He texted Michelle, and so she texted back, "I'm on a boat," she replied, "but let's meet tomorrow." He was ecstatic. They met and talked and made plans for the night. But she backed out because she felt that he was acting kind of strange. So the psychic told him that the trouble had come from a spirit that was stalking him. So she needed $28,000. Then $28,000 more. Michelle had grown cold suddenly, he thought, and so the spirit explanation sounded right, so he paid the money. A month later, the psychic suggested that they perform a fake funeral ritual to make the spirit think that the man was dead. another $40,000. When that didn't work, the psychic said that she needed a time machine to go back and cleanse his past. So when the man balked at that, she said a suitable watch would do the job, and she gave him a list of choices. He said he selected one from the cheaper ones, a rose gold Rolex for $30,000. This is a true story. I'm not making this up. So in December, the psychic said that they had to lure the spirit over a bridge of gold in another realm so that it would become trapped. She said that $80,000 would buy an 80-mile bridge. Sold. The psychic, it should be noticed, promised to return most of the money when her work was done. By the year's end, the bill had reached more than $320,000. There's more. The spirit was crossing the bridge, albeit very slowly, the man wrote. Then the psychic said that she needed a second bridge for Michelle's spirit. I thought to myself, well, I have the money just sitting in the bank, so he paid $90,000. Then he made a devastating discovery. On February 17th of 2014, he pulled up Michelle's Facebook page and read the most recent post. Michelle was dead. She had been dead for 9 days. The investigator said she died of a possible drug overdose. So the man was shattered. And he told us to the psychic, but she pivoted, and she said, I told you there were evil spirits. They killed her. So the psychic then told me that she was going to reincarnate Michelle. The new Michelle wouldn't be exactly like the old one, but her spirit would be placed into the body of the 31-year-old woman. So 1 year and many payouts passed. By then, the psychic said that she was working so many hours on his behalf that she had no time to tell fortunes and was behind in her rent. So he sent more money, even borrowing $28,000 from a colleague that he guaranteed with his future earnings, until he finally ran out of money. I'm broke, he told the psychic, after selling his car and borrowing from his friends and relatives, in addition to the colleague. The new Michelle was in Los Angeles, she told him. Go find her. So he met a woman in California that the psychic later said was the new Michelle, but she wasn't 31, she was 24, and she didn't seem to have Michelle inside of her. He'd lost his apartment. And then when he'd had enough, he returned to New York and he sought out an investigator. And they went to the police. And the bank statements were given to the detectives. He was out $713,975. So the psychic and her companion were arrested, and they were charged with grand larceny and remained in jail. And the man recalled in his disappointment upon meeting the new Michelle, this caused me to start to think, he said, that the psychic wasn't everything that she purported to be. You think? So why did I read you this ridiculous story? Because as ridiculous as it is, you know what it demonstrates? His desire to be in relationship. He spent $713,000 pursuing someone who didn't even want him. You would say, and I watched your faces, in incredulity, your mouths were open, your heads were shaking, you were saying, what's wrong with this guy? Is anything upstairs? He wasn't paying to what was going on upstairs. He was paying to what was going on in here. Jesus desires to be in intimacy with you and I. And he asks for nothing, except that we desire to be in intimacy with him. He asks that we desire to be as close to him as he is as close to us. Relationships cost something. I'm not saying that anyone should spend $713,000 pursuing a relationship, but I am saying that when you're going to enter a relationship, it can't be casual. Not that kind. It can't be something that we treat with indifference. It can't be just a matter of convenience. The Eucharist is something that we have to see as a necessity, as a relationship. I have listened over and over and over again for the last 2 months, requesting, begging people to step up to fill the open hours in the chapel. I want to tell you that right now the status of the chapel is mezza. I don't know how long it's going to stay open. And I'm not saying that to threaten anybody. I'm saying it's a reality because you can't continue to have people who are going to take on 5 and 6 hours a week. A handful of people who are sustaining a chapel while many people come for a few minutes and then leave because they don't want to make a commitment for an hour. That's not perpetual adoration. Relationships cost something. I'm mindful that for the last 2 weeks there have been no daily mass in Rochester. Father Dan is very sick, and we have to pray for him. I'm also mindful that as a culture, we're extremely mobile. And we think nothing of getting into our automobiles and driving a half hour or an hour to our favorite restaurant. I wonder how many of us would get in our car and drive an hour or half hour to receive the Eucharist. We live in a very convenient society. But our convenience is disappearing because there's a crisis of priesthood in the diocese. I've been saying for a long time, who's going to baptize your children? Who's going to confirm them? Who's going to marry you at the altar? Who's going to celebrate Eucharist for you? You know, I came from a parish in Concord. We celebrated the 50th anniversary. And I said to them one day, if the bishop were going to start to parcel out priests to parishes based on the number of vocations they had produced, do you know how many priests Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish would get? 0. They had produced 0 vocations in 50 years. Something wrong with that. It's a stupid story. It's crazy. And yet it's true. It's true because as disordered as it is, it highlights the desire to be intimate, to be in relationship. And although this man sent $713,000, Christ gave his life. And you can't put a price tag on that. You can't put a price tag on that. So the real question is this: what would I give? What would I give? Or what do I give in response to someone who stretches his arms on the cross and says, "This is my body given for you"? What's my response to that? $713,000 gone. because of a foolish choice. He didn't discern here. But it doesn't take away what was aching here.